Hello and welcome to the historic Blue Coat Gallery in the heart of Liverpool. In this special programme, Echoes of Peace, as we mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War, we'll be examining China's often forgotten role in the conflict and considering how lessons learned in 1945 still resonate today. My guests, the historian and sinologist Dr. Francis Wood, Dr. Robert Lyman and Yangwen Zheng, Professor of Chinese History at Manchester University.
I think it's the question of what comes afterwards. And I think at the time there was just a very serious political wish to keep China rather out of it. I mean, people were not interested. You get Korean War, China sort of fades from our memory. But I would like to kind of bring back the fact that during the war, I mean, people in Britain felt incredibly strongly for China. Something that's little known is that during the war, between about 1943 and 1946, British people, ordinary people, raised £160 million to send to China for relief. I mean, people in Britain cared desperately about it. So ordinary people minded very much. They took a penny a week to work, they took a penny a week to school, they went to meetings, they attended special meals, they went to cinema. They raised a huge amount. They cared very much. But after the war, the politics of the world shut China out.
Robert, what's your take on this?
Well, I concur with my two learned friends. The reality is that China was the heart of the war. The East Asia War began and ended because of China. And it's a real travesty in my 40 years of studying the subject, how little we in the West know, but actually how few people in the East understand it as well. So we have a learning game ahead of us. All of us involved in this field need to do more. It was important because China was the heart of Japanese imperial ambitions, and we must not forget that. If we are fighting fascism, we're fighting imperialism, and China was the battleground of Japanese imperialism. And that's why it's so incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to understand also the Allied strategies. The war did not begin at Pearl Harbor. No. The war began in 1931. Many millions of Chinese had been killed by the time we even knew about it. So there's a sense of cognizant failure, dissonance even, over those years of not understanding what's going on. We need to open the doors and have a look inside.
Professor Zheng, do you think this is racism or cultural misunderstanding? I mean, have these played into Western attitudes towards China's role in the war? Is it easy and that simple?
Could be. I think Francis was saying because it was the Cold War after 1945 and the Civil War, so I think the Cold War kept each other busy. And then after that, it's the economic reform. People were busy making money. So I think it's really time. I'm talking from the perspective of a teacher. For my Modern China module, first year Chinese history module at Manchester, I have 180 students, and I teach about the Second World War. There's no reading. You assign readings to students, there's nothing. So we need to study.
Is that because they can't read or there aren't enough books?
Because nobody has written much about the Second World War, the China theatre. And we didn't mention Michael Lindsay. Yeah. Because he was instrumental in Yan'an. Without him, I don't know how the communists would have gotten the message out. And we didn't talk about the Chinese expedition forces working with the British in Burma, liberating Burma. Some Chinese might have heard about the Renanqiang Dajie. Chinese forces, expedition forces, saved 7,000 British troops with 500 missionaries and journalists. Nobody talks about that. And nobody writes about it. So when I teach the module, teach World War China at War, you assign readings to students. There's no reading to assign. So it's really urgent for us to study.
How is the Second World War viewed in China now? It's interesting that two of the biggest box office hits this summer in China are dramas set in the Second World War.
I think there's a renewal, there's a desire in China at the moment to understand the war. and which I had never seen before. Maybe before it was the economic reform. I think there's a desire today. So we need to ride on that tide and do more research. Yes, yeah.
Robert, let's talk about some specifics. Events like the Nanjing massacre, the bombing of Chongqing and Shanghai, especially devastating, and are known globally. How did atrocities like these shape both domestic morale and international perception of the conflict?
I think we need to remember that at the time of the Nanjing massacre in 1937, when at least 300,000 men, women and children were arbitrarily killed by the occupying power, the world didn't understand the scale of the terror that was being undertaken. Terror was a new form of warfare. And I have to say, many people then and now didn't believe it. And they didn't believe it because it's almost incomprehensible to think about this. This is why Hogg is so incredibly important. This is why history is so incredibly important, because we have lots of eyewitnesses from Nanjing in particular who saw exactly what was going on. And it wasn't as though the Japanese army, the Imperial Japanese army, was hiding what it was doing. There's a cognitive dissonance here in Japan. I've interviewed lots of Japanese veterans in the last 40 years, and a number of them, when I ask this question, I always ask the question, and did you see any atrocities? Not a single Japanese soldier saw a single atrocity. I know the Japanese army was incredibly disciplined, and we would never have done anything like that. So there's a matter of us, in terms of understanding, opening the door into China in the war. We all have to do it, those in Japan and those here as well.
Francis, do you think the West is ready to recognise China's role in the war? And if not, why?
It's a question of what you mean by the West. I think people are. The question of whether politicians are is yet another one. I mean, at the political level, there's still this extraordinary suspicion, mistrust, and so on. Really kind of very negative views of China. But I think lower down, people, I think to go back to, like all the people who raised money during the Second World War, they send their pennies to China, that ordinary people have a great sense of sympathy and understand, and would love to hear more about, I think, the stories, of people like Hogg, but also the thinking of the Lisbon Murrow. I think that'll go a very long way to creating a popular support, whether it feeds upwards to the uninformed who govern us is another question.
Professor Zheng, what are the other key moments, if I can put it like that, in the conflict that are largely forgotten or perhaps were never even known about in the West?
For me, the most important is Michael Lindsay and the Chinese expedition forces to Burma, to India, 中国远征军. And there were thousands of them. They collaborated with the British. They broke one of the camps when the Japanese encircled the British, about 7,000 of them. That story needs to be written. And it's not, and I'm trying to get my students to write dissertations, MA dissertation, to do that. And to do PhD, you really need to go to the archives. You really need to go interview people, but I think most of them are gone by now. It's really sad. For us, you can't explain Burma theater without understanding the Chinese expedition forces. So for me, that's the most important.
Professor, how has the view of China's role in the Second World War changed over the last 80 years? And why do you think that might be?
That's a tough question.
I know, but you're a professor.
I think because after the Civil War, 1949, the communist regime was founded. I think because of the Cold War, the antagonization, I think scholars had no time and people have no interest in such kind of things. I think the wealth and relative peace in the post-Mao era has brought out renewed interest, scholarly interest as well, because we see more scholarship on the Second World War in China, including Japanese forces in China. But there are lots of things that needs to be written right now.
Robert, I'm guessing it's historians and journalists who are to blame here.
No, I blame politicians for all of this.
Okay.
It's absolutely right. I think one of the extraordinary things in China I've seen over the last 10 years is a real desire to understand the deeper avenues and rivers of history in the country, and I applaud it. And I see it also in India as well, as a historian of the Far East. And I think, it's absolutely right. There are some fantastic stories that we all need to pick up. I'm just going to go back to the Chinese Expeditionary Force in Burma in 1942 because it was exceptional. The Chinese Expeditionary Force saved the British Army in Burma. And there's a fantastic little anecdote which I like telling my students. The British Army in Burma in 1942 was commanded by General Sir Harold Alexander. And at the end of the final battle at a place called Yananyang on the Irrawaddy, he wanted to be able to award the Japanese general, General Sun, with a British award. He had no authority to do so, so he got his ADC and he took some scissors and he cut off the CBE ribbon on his own tunic and awarded it to General Sun. And it was finally agreed by Buckingham Palace that he might do so. Those are the stories that we want to hear because they're true. I mean, the Burma Army, the British Army Burma, would not have escaped had it not been for the 30,000 men of the 5th and 6th Chinese Expeditionary Force divisions. And I think these are stories that would make brilliant movies as well, by the way. So if there's anyone in the media, anyone in the Chinese media here, that's a really fantastic story. And you've got two authorities on the floor in Burma who could help you.
I can write the script for you.
Francis, do you think this global focus on this 80th anniversary of the end of the war is perhaps helping to get the message out, or are we forgetting because they're now dying, they've gone, that generation?
I know, I think it's true, it's sadly true, but there are so many, I mean, it's not that far back, is it? I mean, people are as old as me. My parents were in the war, they were in Bletchley, failing to decode codes, but I think there are enough people around who are, the children of those who participated and who have a lot of things. I think there are more things and objects and things that can help us remember. So I think there's a lot of hope that the First World War is far too far gone, but now we should, and we should make an enormous effort to use every possible means to salvage the memories of those, what they remembered of their parents, even if the parents didn't say something. That is in itself a significant fact. If your parents wouldn't speak about the horrors of war, then we need to get round behind and understand why.
Professor Zheng, earlier this year, I interviewed Joe Bohr, the author of the book Should the World Fear China? And in that book, he wrote that China needs to overcome its lingering victimhood to fulfill its international responsibilities. I mean, would you agree with that? Would you go along with that, seen through the prism of its role in the Second World War?
I suppose I agree that China can move forward. China should move forward. We should move forward, but not forgetting what happened. But to move forward, you need to know what happened. And what happened is what matters to me as a historian, as a lecturer who teaches every day. And we need sources, and we need books and articles, and that can only be done by research.
Robert, how did China's resistance impact Allied strategies in the Pacific, and what about in Europe? If nothing else, I guess, it allowed the Soviet forces to focus on the Western campaign.
It did, absolutely. It was incredibly important. I mean, I can't exaggerate enough the importance of China staying in the war and holding down the Japanese army along the Yellow River, as we call it, because otherwise those troops would have been elsewhere. And we need to remember that the reason why the war began in the Pacific in 1941 was because of the Japanese inability to successfully prosecute the war in China. Now, that's a message that I try to preach, because it's really important for modern Chinese to realize how much they had held the Japanese down militarily. The Japanese were unable to achieve their strategic goals in China, and it's for that reason that they lashed out against the Americans. And I think, strategically, it was incredibly important at all the major conferences from 1942 onwards, Roosevelt, Stalin, and and Churchill had a special focus on keeping China, and indeed in one of them, the Chinese leader, Kuomintang leader, attended in Tehran. And that's incredibly important. We can't ignore China from the overall global strategy of the war.
Hello, welcome back to this special programme, Echoes of Peace, from the Blue Coat Gallery here in Liverpool, marking the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Many of the international groups that shaped the world order after the conflict remain in place today: the United Nations, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. But 80 years on, are they still relevant? My guests are Ana Palacio, Spain's former Foreign Minister, and Peter Medgyessey, former Prime Minister of Hungary.
It doesn't make sense in the world of today that there are 9 Europeans sitting on the board of the World Bank, deciding what the policies of the World Bank are. 9 Europeans out of 26. Doesn't make sense today. And this has consequences in the purpose. For instance, I will not elaborate, but certain restrictions to energy policy that for Africa do not make sense. We Europeans, we buy gas from Mozambique, but the World Bank cannot finance power-generated gas from Mozambique, although we use the gas from Mozambique to make power. This is an example. This doesn't make sense, and we have to understand that legitimacy comes from inclusion, and that I think that relevance comes from reflecting the needs of the world.
Peter, where do we really stand now here in 2025? Where would you say we stand? Are these institutions built after the Second World War going to continue? Will they endure?
The power relations is changed fundamentally. And that have to be recognized. Have to realizing in the structure of UN and the other institutions. And now is not relevant what is the situation and what is the actual structure. And I think this is also a question of the competition. A question of the competition between the powers. And I think we have to accept this change. The competition, as I said in my small introduction, is good. Have to accept and not to fighting against, but enjoy the results of the competitions.
Anna, what do you think the past tells us about the present and the future of global relations? Is there anything to be learned from this past 80 years?
Absolutely. Especially from China. China is a fantastic example, and there was an intervention on learning about China, learning about Chinese civilization. It reminded me Eleanor Roosevelt's memoirs. Eleanor Roosevelt was heading the American delegation to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and she refers how Dr. P.C. Chang, of course, he was representing Chiang Kai-shek, nationalist China, but he said at a certain moment, she tells, and suddenly Dr. Chang was really, and he said, the Secretariat should learn Confucianism, and of course should learn Confucianism, because, Peter, you're absolutely right, we have to reach agreements. And China has this fantastic, when you read about those that were present at the creation, and this is a sentence that President Xi Jinping uses now, because China is now much more comfortable with this duality of humiliation, but at the same time being a key actor of the post-World War II. And yes, it was a Western dominated, and yes, we have to rebalance security with freedom. We have to rebalance individualism with the importance of the group. But this debate is there from the beginning, from Bretton Woods, in the San Francisco debates, and China had a very strong voice that China has just withdrawn from for many years, and that China now is recovering this, being comfortable with saying, yes, we were key actors, yes, we were there, and frankly, today, China is trying to lead the reform that is needed.
Peter, we know about the increasing global trade tensions. We know about the rise of the far right across much of Europe and a raft of emerging countries demanding their voices are heard. Is it now time to rethink the world order cemented 8 decades ago?
Yes, it is the time. Not so easy to answer to this question, how to do, because this is the question. Practically, everybody is agree that have to create a new world order, but how to do that? I think the right way to recognize the reality, because the reality show that always the weak doesn't like the competition, and the strong like very much the competition. If you look 20, 30 years ago, United States was very much pro the competition because it was the strongest. In the time, changed the situation, and now China is very close to United States. United States doesn't like the competition today. Want to defend the economy and to put the taxes and everything. And I think the most important to recognize the reality.
Anna, if this new reality is going to happen, how is it going to happen? Is it going to be the work of politicians or academics? It's difficult to imagine agreement breaking out around the world.
I'm an incrementalist. I think realism is the key word. And frankly, today, we have to understand that by United States withdrawing from the role that United States has played of inspiring and fostering this world order that we had, there is an opportunity that China is betting on. Clearly, when you see the policy of the President Xi Jinping and the present government, it's clear China is leading this idea that we need to keep the essence, because what we cannot just go back to the 30s where aggression, just aggression without any justification, and Manchuria is a key example, just is rewarded. And this is where United States, because Roosevelt plays a key role in the 40s, United States now doesn't. So I think that China has a great opportunity to lead this idea of inclusiveness, of responsibility, of just being relevant for the problems of today. And governance, as I mentioned the World Bank, because I know the institution very well, but it's true of the Security Council, it's true of United Nations, it's true everywhere. We need to address it in an honest way, and we need critical mass. When you say the global south, you say the rest of the world. We need this critical mass, and let's hope that the Europeans will play a role.
Peter, we're here today to reflect on China's role as an ally in the Second World War. How do you think we ensure that alliance remains strong 80 years on?
The Western world not really ready to recognize, to accept the reality of the alliance. And we go in a very dangerous sense, because the world is pushed to create the new alliance. But the new alliance could be very, 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 very dangerous. If you look, if Europe is out of the game, what will happen? United States look around to find a new alliance. China, Russia is obliged to look to the new alliance. So that's have to prevent and have to start the dialogue about these questions.
Anna, where do you see relations with China going in the near or longer term?
This is a new world, and we have to keep, but without nostalgia. And the problem of Europeans is that we are full of nostalgia. And we have not to resign to an unruly world full of dangers. And there, of course, China has a key role to play, but the others as well. I mean, we need from Brazil to Indonesia to Africa to Latin America. And if there is a critical mass, we will be able, because the problem of institutions is that they don't die. Institutions never die. They just stifle. They just become irrelevant. And what are we seeing now? The World Bank has its problem, but we have the Infrastructure Investment Bank. We have the Belt and Road. What do we want? A parallel system that we cannot afford to have two systems and to have all these institutions. I think that we need to, it's not easy, and the institutions have inertia, and it's very complicated, but where there is a will, there is a way.
Final thought from both of you then. How do you think on this 80th anniversary we can prevent history from repeating itself in this increasingly turbulent world of ours?
We have to understand why happened, and to say, okay, we understand, we know the consequences, and we draw the consequence. 80 years is a lot. Changed fundamentally the world. We have to accept the changes, and we have to adapt the changes and to lead where we go.
Anna.
Well, you know, I think that in the end we have to learn from history and really learn, meaning sheer power is not the alternative. We may have rules that have to be changed. We may have institutions that have to be revamped or reinvented or whatever, but we cannot just go back to the 30s. This is what we learned from China and from the war of resistance in China.
Well, that brings us to the end of this special programme, Echoes of Peace, marking the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. From me and all of us here in Liverpool, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project,
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.